Last week's violent insurrection on the Capitol is a stain on our democracy. A riotous mob, incited
January
by the president,
13th,
stormed
U.S.
these
House
very
of Representatives
halls, beat and murdered
debate
police officers,
impeachment
planted
resolution
pipe
for
bombs,
President
and left
Trump.
our nation
What's up,
shocked
everybody? Welcome back to
and in mourning.
Unspecified Podcast.
The president's rhetoric, actions, and
Just
refusal
here
to
to sit
accept
back and watch this with
responsibility
you guys.
are an
I'm going to be
imminent
hanging
threat
out
to
in
our
chat.
nation. I vote to impeach the president. I urge my colleagues.
Let's talk about
to
this absolute shit show. Excuse my French. Pardon my French.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. We reserve.
What's up, everybody? Just going to be sitting back and chat with you guys.
Madam Speaker, I now yield 30 seconds to the gentleman from Illinois, Mr. Krishnamurthy.
The gentleman from Illinois is recognized for 30 seconds.
Madam Speaker, my parents brought me as an infant to America because they knew it's the land of democracy. It's the beacon of hope for all the world. We called it the American dream. When Donald Trump told rioters to go to the Capitol and, quote unquote, fight like hell, he incited an attack on the Capitol and the ideals comprising the American dream. I'm voting for impeachment because I know we're still the country my parents believed in. And I
What's
will
up, everybody? Thank you so much for
fight
that like.
hell for it.
Share you rock.
I yield back.
Brandon, what's up, my man?
Yields back. The gentleman from New York reserves. The gentleman
Oh
from
yeah, it's a
Ohio
poop
is
show for sure.
recognized.
Yeah.
The gentleman from
So
Ohio
January
reserves.
13th,
The
what's up,
gentleman from
everyone?
New
Welcome
York.
back to Unspecified
Madam Speaker, I
Podcast.
now yield 30
Just going to be
seconds
hanging
to
out
the
in chat and
gentlelady
watching
from
this
Michigan,
crap
Ms.
go
Lawrence.
down.
The gentlewoman from Michigan is recognized for 30 seconds.
Madam Chair, on Wednesday the 6th, Democrats and Republicans hid on the floor, put on gas masks, and was ushered out of this room. We in this country cannot begin healing in unity without accountability and justice. The President of the United States incited a violent insurrection against Congress, you, me, and the Vice President of the United States. This cannot be ignored. Impeach now. Thank you, Madam Chair.
The gentlewoman yields back. The gentleman from New York continues to reserve. The gentleman from Ohio is recognized.
Reserve.
The gentleman from Ohio wishes to reserve. The gentleman from New York is recognized.
Madam Speaker, I now yield 30 seconds to the distinguished gentlelady from California, Ms. Lee.
The gentlewoman from California is recognized for 30 seconds.
Madam Speaker, on January 6, Donald Trump incited his white nationalist supporters to initiate an attempted coup against the heart of our democracy, the United States Capitol. This heinous act of domestic terrorism demands that Congress act to remove this president. Donald Trump has been and remains a threat to our national security and our democracy, and wholly unfit to serve as president. He and his supporters must be held accountable for inciting violence against the government of the United States. Congress must act immediately to remove this clear and present danger to our country.
What's up, everybody? Just want to say hey.
Donald Trump
The
again.
gentleman's time has expired. The gentleman from New York
Unbelievable.
reserves. The gentleman from Ohio is recognized.
Thank you, Madam
Boston,
Speaker. I
what's
yield
up?
1
Mary,
minute to
how
the
you
gentlelady
doing?
from Georgia,
Ambrose,
Ms.
hey, what's up,
Taylor
man?
Green.
Axiom, what's up? Hey, man, glad you're on. Increasingly difficult to have open conversation
Speaker,
anymore with
I
people.
am
I
against
enjoy your live
the
videos. Dude,
impeachment effort
I
by
enjoy
the
you guys
Democrats.
being here with us.
President Trump has held over 600 rallies in the last 4 years. None of them included assaulting police, destroying businesses, or burning down cities. Democrats have spent all this time endorsing and enabling violent riots that left billions in property damage and 47 dead across
Oh, you should have
the
heard
United
earlier,
States.
R.S. Dandy.
Democrats are on record supporting violence when it serves their cause, in their own words, on social media,
Cardinal Killer,
on
what's up, brother?
interviews, and on fundraising
No,
platforms.
Reba,
Act
this is
Blue.
not right.
Democrats support defunding the police when it's someone else's city, someone else's home, and someone else's business. Democrats will take away everyone's guns just as long as they have guards
Amen.
with guns. Democrats' impeachment of President Trump today has now set the standard that they should be removed for their support of
Tell 'em.
violence against the American people.
Tell 'em.
I yield back. Thank you.
Yeah.
The gentlewoman yields back. The gentleman from Ohio wishes to reserve. The gentleman from New York is recognized.
Madam Speaker, I now yield 30 seconds to the distinguished gentleman from Michigan, Mr. Levin.
The gentleman from Michigan is recognized for 30 seconds.
Madam Speaker, for 2 months, Donald Trump used the biggest megaphone in the world to organize a campaign of outright lies to overturn a free and fair election. On January 6th, he summoned and incited a mob of domestic terrorists to fight like hell and sent them to ransack this Capitol in order to prevent us from
Yes,
formalizing
MLP,
his
you are
election
exactly
loss.
right. A
It
waste
was
of taxpayer
grotesque
dollars.
orgy of deadly white supremacism, anti-Semitism, and strongman rule. Today, we will do our duty and vote to remove the author of this horrifying chapter and banish him from public service. I yield back.
The gentleman from New York reserves.
Unbelievable, guys.
The gentleman from Ohio is recognized.
All-out
Can I
smear
inquire on the time
campaign attack.
The gentleman from Ohio has 20 minutes
And they just get to
remaining.
say whatever they want and call
And the
the right
gentleman
whatever
from
they
New York
want.
has 21
They are the
and
ones
3/4.
hyperpolarizing, okay?
reserve.
They are the ones that don't want
Gentleman
peace.
from Ohio
They are
reserves.
waging war on
The
us.
gentleman from New York is recognized.
Madam Speaker, I now yield 30 seconds to the distinguished gentleman from California, Mr. Levin.
The gentleman from California is recognized for 30 seconds.
Madam Speaker, what each of us chooses to do today, whether we vote to hold this president to account or look the other way, will we be remembered by history, by our children and their children. The facts are clear. The evidence of Trump's insurrection overwhelming. History calls on us to do what's right rather than just politically expedient. Let us look back on this day with honor, not disgrace, knowing we were up to the oath we all took. Thank you, and I yield back.
The gentleman yields back. The gentleman from New York reserves. The gentleman from Ohio is recognized.
Madam Speaker, we reserve.
The gentleman from Ohio wishes to reserve. The gentleman from New York is recognized.
Madam Speaker, I now yield 30 seconds to the gentlelady
It's that
from
or they're
Virginia,
all out
Gloria.
ignorant
The
or
gentlewoman from
ignoring
Virginia is
it,
recognized
Cassie.
for 30 seconds.
They have to know how
Thank you.
hypocritical they are.
Madam
They are
Speaker,
on the attack.
The perpetrators of this heinous attack on our nation's democracy were Americans, encouraged and emboldened by President Trump because he could not accept the outcome of a free and fair election. His actions are seditious, and the president has proven that he is not fit to serve. History will look back on this moment to see who stood strong in support of American democracy. As my colleagues have said, we must come together, but our nation cannot begin to heal until there is
The gentlewoman's time has
accountability for
expired.
the atrocity.
The
we
gentlewoman's
witnessed
time
last
has
week.
expired.
I yield back.
The gentlewoman. The gentleman reserves. The gentleman from Ohio.
They do have
is
amnesia
recognized.
when it's
Thank you, Madam
convenient for
Speaker. I
them.
would
They
yield
forget
1
all
minute to
about
the
the
gentleman from
burning
Georgia,
of the
Mr.
cities
Clyde.
all across the nation this
The
summer.
gentleman from Georgia, is it?
Yep, gentleman from Georgia,
1
1 minute.
is recognized.
Madam Speaker, I rise today in opposition to the effort to impeach President Trump. This course of action will only increase dissent and disunity across our country, and it flies in the face of all efforts to heal our nation. Quite simply, it is a shameful final act of political retribution, retribution this president has weathered since day one.
Yes, this is
I have
true.
no doubt that those who breached the Capitol will have due process and their day in court. However, there will be no investigation in the People's House into whether the allegation against the president meets the criteria for a crime worthy of impeachment. No evidence was presented, no witness testified, no cross-examination was conducted, no due process was afforded, and that sets an extremely dangerous precedent for the future. If my Democratic colleagues were serious in their efforts to get to the truth, they would convene the House Judiciary Committee and investigate, but they are not. And so I am proud to stand before you today to defend our president from the injustices my Democratic colleagues are so giddy to pursue. I oppose this effort to impeach the president and ask all members of the House to do the same. I yield back.
The gentleman yields back. The gentleman from Ohio wishes to reserve. The gentleman from New York is recognized.
Madam Speaker, I yield 30 seconds to the distinguished gentlelady from Georgia, Ms. McBath.
The gentlewoman from Georgia is recognized for 30 seconds.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I rise with a heavy heart for what our nation has endured. All those who've incited an attack on these halls of freedom must never forget that in every generation, Americans
Jamie
of all
Brofist.
colors and creeds have laid down their lives in the struggles against tyranny, the fight against fascism, and the defense against those who would betray the values upon which this nation was founded. It is our duty to shoulder that defense of our democracy here today. The president's actions have laid bare his contempt for our Constitution, and he must be removed.
Gentlewoman's time has expired. The gentleman from New York reserves. The gentleman from Ohio. The gentleman from Ohio wishes to
We reserve.
reserve.
Honestly, their
The gentleman
attitude
from New
shows me
York
how
is
much power
recognized.
Trump
Madam
still
Speaker,
has.
I now yield 30 seconds to the distinguished
They're
gentleman
terrified
from
of
New
him.
York, Mr. Meeks.
Think
The
about that.
gentleman from New York is recognized for 30 seconds.
The armed insurrectionists that stormed the Capitol did not emerge out of a vacuum. They were lied to by Republican senators and Republican congressmen and women. But they were incited to violence by one man above all else, Donald J. Trump, who tried to be the ultimate ruler of our democracy.
Intel, you're dead on, brother. Intel, you got it.
Our allies are watching, and our adversaries are watching. And we must show them that no one will rule this country be above the law. The cameras of history are rolling. We must act. We must impeach Donald J. Trump to show the world that we will stand for right.
The gentleman from New York reserves. The gentleman from Ohio is recognized.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I would yield 1 minute to the gentleman from Utah.
The gentleman from Utah is recognized for 1 minute.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Last Wednesday, on my third day, I realized that I can make hard and seemingly unpopular decisions. Voting to strip Electoral College votes from
Thank you so much for the
dangerous precedent
follow.
Set by Democrats many years ago, perpetuated by my party as well. I heard nothing in those debates that justified such a high bar. A rushed impeachment will set a similar precedent. Without a single hearing or investigation, I simply cannot reach the high bar of impeachment. To my district, I commit to constantly being objective in all of my decision making. And as I abandon the remainder of my remarks, as I listen to this debate, it's no wonder our nation is divided. We are on an absolute race to the bottom. And I was hoping
that dog stray, great idea.
Could have hit rock bottom.
Hindsight 2020, bro
I commit
fist.
to doing better, and I hope that we all can dig in and find a way. Thank you.
The gentleman yields back his time. The gentleman from Ohio reserves. The gentleman from New York is recognized.
Madam Speaker, I now yield 30 seconds to the gentlelady from Ohio, Ms. Beatty.
The gentlewoman from New York is recognized for 30 seconds.
Thank you. Domestic terrorists attacked our democracy, urged on by a sitting president. These insurrectionists believe Donald Trump's lies about the stolen election. They obeyed his call to attack. They literally carried his banner while storming the Capitol. Last week's insurrection was shocking and tragic. It was a culmination of 4 years of assaults on our democracy. We must impeach this president, and the Congressional Black Caucus stands ready to join in a bipartisan message to the likes of Donald Trump.
Expired. The gentleman from New York reserves. The gentleman from Ohio is recognized.
Madam Speaker, we reserve.
The gentleman from Ohio reserves. The gentleman from New York.
Madam Speaker, I now yield 30 seconds to the gentlelady from Wisconsin, Ms. Moore.
The gentlewoman from Wisconsin is recognized for 30 seconds.
Madam Speaker, the president radicalized American citizens, and as his vice president fled from a lynch mob, the speaker cowered while people died. He watched with glee. That is why, even though it's only 7 days before the end of his term, we have the fierce urgency of now. 7 days is too long for him to be in power. He could declassify state secrets. He could monetize national secrets to foreign adversaries, and he could even pardon.
The gentleman's time has expired.
The person.
The gentlewoman's time has expired. The gentleman from New York.
They are terrible.
Reserves.
They are
The gentleman
terrified.
from Ohio is recognized.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I would yield 1 minute to the gentleman from Texas, Mr. Arrington.
The gentleman from Texas is recognized for 1 minute.
Madam Speaker, I rise with great sorrow to oppose this second attempt at a baseless impeachment from my Democrat colleagues. This week's attack on the U.S. Capitol was completely unacceptable, and the people involved should be met with swift accountability. The president didn't incite a riot. The president didn't lead an insurrection, and there are no high crimes and misdemeanors requisite of an impeachment. I'm not saying the president didn't exercise poor judgment, but to criminalize political speech by blaming lawless acts on the president's rhetoric is wrong, Madam Speaker, and a very dangerous precedent. The criminals who stormed the Capitol that day acted on their own volition. They are responsible for their actions. This is an important moment, Madam Speaker, for our nation. We have the opportunity to come together and do what's right for our country. The votes are certified. President Trump has conceded. Let's focus on the future and get back to the people's business. I yield back.
Gentleman yields back. The gentleman from Ohio reserves. Yes. The gentleman from New York is recognized.
Madam Speaker, I now yield 30 seconds to the distinguished gentlelady from Illinois, Ms. Newman.
The gentlewoman from Illinois is recognized for 30 seconds.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. It's an honor to speak today. So today I stand with this body to impeach this president. I agree with my Democratic colleagues. I also agree with my Republican colleagues. Let's unite. Let's unite to address this pandemic and start by simply wearing a mask. Let's unite to bring back the economy and start by putting $2,000 checks in people's pockets. And let's unite to hold these domestic terrorists accountable and impeach this president. Thank you, Madam Speaker, and I yield back.
The gentlewoman yields back. The gentleman from New York reserves. The gentleman from Ohio is recognized. The gentleman from Ohio reserves. The gentleman from New York is recognized.
Madam Speaker, how much time do I have, please?
The gentleman from New York has 18 and 1/4 minute, and the gentleman from Ohio, 17 minutes remaining.
Thank you very much. I now yield 30 seconds to the distinguished gentleman from New Jersey, Mr. Norcross.
The gentleman from New Jersey is recognized for 30 seconds.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I rise today at a time of historical concern. Last week on this very House floor, an attack on democracy, that symbol. But it was an attack from within. This very floor, let's be clear, cause and effect. Rally at the White House, march down Pennsylvania Avenue, a parade in reverse, and an attack to this chamber. A police officer was killed. And what I hear is time to heal. He's not even buried yet. It's clear and present danger. No one is above the law. Not the president if he has 4 years or 4 days. We must do the right thing for all Americans because he must be held accountable. I yield back.
The gentleman yields back. The gentleman from New York reserves. The gentleman from Ohio is
Thank you, Madam
recognized.
Speaker. I would yield 1 minute to the gentlelady.
Businesses are still shut down,
Indiana,
and this
Ms.
is what they're
Parks.
wasting
The
their time
gentlewoman
on.
from
Wow,
Indiana is
great
recognized
point,
for 1 minute.
MLP.
Madam Speaker, I appreciate a variety of opinions, but any accusations must go through the proper due process, whether it's election fraud or an impeachable offense. And someone
Yes,
who did
thank you,
not
Raybo.
support the objection to certification last
Dividing, yeah,
week,
exactly,
I will not
John.
support this political charade today. The rule of law and due process is vital to what our constitutional republic stands for. Congress should stop playing divisive politics and start working on delivering real good policies for the American people. I yield back.
The gentlewoman yields back. The gentleman from Ohio reserves his time. The gentleman from New York is recognized.
Madam Speaker, I now yield 30 seconds to the distinguished gentleman from California, Mr.
The gentleman
Panetta.
from California is recognized for 30 seconds.
A week ago was the culmination of carnage caused to our country by this president. 4 years ago, he said he would stop such devastation. Instead, the president has continued to debase our democracy with assaults on our elections and incitement at the ellipse and the battery at our Capitol. American exceptionalism is not guaranteed. We must always work to grow it, and that includes our work today to hold President Trump accountable. American carnage started with this president. A vote for impeachment will stop it for our posterity. I yield
The
back.
gentleman yields back. The gentleman from New York reserves. The gentleman from Ohio is recognized.
We reserve.
The gentleman from Ohio reserves. The gentleman from New York.
Madam Speaker, I
They
now yield
are
30
so
seconds to the
scared.
distinguished
Wow.
gentleman from Wisconsin, Mr. Pocan.
The gentleman from Wisconsin is recognized for 30 seconds.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. The U.S. Capitol has not been breached for over 200 years since the War of 1812. That is, until last week, when it wasn't another country that attacked us, but our own president. President Donald Trump asked his supporters to march on the Capitol, inciting domestic terrorism that cost 5 lives, including a Capitol police officer. And we all know, whether you say it aloud or not, Donald Trump is responsible for inciting the attacks in our democracy, that he should have been the one person protecting it the most. And for that, he is unfit
The
to be
gentleman's
president,
time has
and we must
expired.
impeach him.
The gentleman's time's expired. The gentleman from New York reserves. The gentleman from Ohio is recognized.
Madam Speaker, I yield 90 seconds to the gentleman from Texas, Mr. Roy.
The gentleman from Texas is yielded 90 seconds.
I thank the gentleman from Ohio. The President of the United States deserves universal condemnation for what was clearly, in my opinion, impeachable conduct, pressuring the Vice President to violate his oath of the Constitution to count the electors. His open and public pressure, courageously rejected by the Vice President, purposely seeded the false belief among the President's supporters, including those assembled on January 6th, that there was a legal path with the President. It was foreseeable and reckless to sow such a false belief that could lead to violence and rioting by loyal supporters whipped into a frenzy. Unfortunately,
Michael,
my Democratic colleagues
yes, no
drafted
kidding.
articles that I believe are flawed and unsupportable, focusing on the legal terms of incitement and insurrection. Even noting impeachment does not require meeting a certain legal standard, that danger for open speech and debate in this body and for the Republic is high if the House approves the articles as written. The language will be used to target members of this body under Section 3 of the 14th Amendment. It will be used to suggest that any statements we make are subject to review by our colleagues and send us down the perilous path of cleansing political speech in the public square. We must end this. Let us condemn that which must be condemned and do so loudly. But let us do it the right way, with deliberation and without disastrous side effects. We must end tearing apart our nation by social media and sound bites. Let us stop.
Raybo, pass
Let
the
us
popcorn.
debate. Let us sit down and lead this nation together. I yield back.
Gentleman yields back. The gentleman from Ohio reserves. The gentleman
These
from
people
New York
don't
is
realize their
recognized.
actions are close to
Madam
creating
Speaker, I now yield
carnage.
30
Yeah,
seconds
man,
to the
I
distinguished
tend to
gentlelady from
agree.
New York, Ms. Maloney.
The gentlewoman from New York is
They're
recognized for
pushing
30
and
seconds.
pushing for change and whatnot,
this
you
vote
know,
is
not to say anything about change, but their pushing has
It's about
begot
protecting
and
our
birthed
nation,
the response that you've
preserving
seen.
democracy,
And
the
they
rule
even
of law.
manipulated some of the response that
facts
you
are
saw at the
clear
Capitol,
and
in my
undisputed.
opinion.
President Trump used a
They continue to
litany of lies
manipulate
about
it
a
with their
stolen
words,
election and willfully incited
and
an
I believe
armed
they may have
insurrection
incited it.
with the intent of stopping the peaceful transfer
Or encouraged
of
it.
power. He attacked not just the Capitol, not just Congress. He even attacked democracy itself. That's why he must be impeached.
Gentlewoman's time is
And I yield
expired.
back.
The gentleman from New York reserves. The gentleman from Ohio is recognized.
Madam Speaker, we reserve.
The gentleman from Ohio wishes to reserve. The gentleman from New York is recognized.
Madam Speaker, I now yield 30 seconds to the distinguished gentleman from North Carolina, Mr. Price.
The gentleman from North Carolina is recognized for 30 seconds.
Madam Chairman, the President has engaged in conduct that is criminal, impeachable, and profoundly threatening to our democracy. He pressed state officials and members of this body to overturn an illegitimate election and to keep him in power. And he then invited and activated a violent mob to invade the Capitol and achieve his desired result by insurrection. If that is not impeachable conduct, I don't know what is. The President must be removed from office immediately and never allowed.
How much you
to
think
hold
this guy
office
cost?
again.
Bought and
Our
paid for all of them. What you think his price tag
The
is? How
gentleman
much you
from
think
New
they
York.
paid for him?
Reserves. The gentleman from Ohio.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I would yield 1 minute to the gentleman from Texas, Mr. Fallon.
Thank you, Mr. Chair.
The gentleman's recognized for 1 minute.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Last summer, the Antifa and BLM riots swept all over our country. Cities were burnt, businesses destroyed, and lives violently stolen. And it wasn't just for an afternoon like those horrible hours we had on January 6th, but rather they went on for weeks and in some cases even months. So if there's any silver lining in this dark cloud, it's that our friends from across the aisle have come to realize that riots are bad. We conservatives have known this all along. This snap impeachment is a sham, and it didn't go through the Judiciary Committee, and it's not even about the President's actual words, but it's about how our Democratic colleagues want to interpret his words and fashion a particular meaning to them. Now, this is just political grandstanding at its worst. The American people desperately want us to move on and tackle the issues and find solutions to them forthwith. Madam Speaker, let's end this obsession and charade, and let's get to work. I yield back.
The gentleman yields back. The gentleman from Ohio wishes to reserve. The gentleman from Ohio wishes to reserve.
Yeah, we reserve.
The gentleman from New York is recognized.
Madam Speaker, I now yield 30 seconds to the gentleman from Illinois, Mr. Quigley.
The gentleman from Illinois is recognized for 30 seconds.
Madam Speaker, now we hear talk of the president's notion of a peaceful transfer of power, which apparently means what? Minimal casualties? Now we hear talk of healing after the criminal acts are completed. Never as a criminal defense attorney did I say, Judge, yeah, my guy completed the armed robbery, but let's heal now.
Rhonda, thank you so much
there
for
was
that light.
accountability. There was accountability then, there should be accountability now, and there should be impeachment now. Thank you, and I yield back.
The gentleman yields back. The gentleman from New York reserves. The gentleman from Ohio is recognized.
Reserve, Madam
The
Speaker.
gentleman from Ohio wishes to reserve. The gentleman from New York is recognized.
Madam Speaker, I now yield 30 seconds to the distinguished gentlelady from North Carolina, a new member of the committee, Ms. Ross.
The gentlewoman from North Carolina is recognized for 30 seconds.
Madam Speaker, I rise today in support of the article of impeachment. The President's responsibility for the violence and insurrection that occurred last Wednesday cannot go unanswered. The President has had multiple opportunities to modify his behavior to bring this country together. Instead, he uses his power to further divide us. He is unrepentant. Congress must act for the good of this country. Madam Speaker, I yield back my time.
The gentlewoman yields back. The gentleman from New York reserves. The gentleman from Ohio.
It's
is
funny you
recognized.
guys are
Thank you,
mentioning
Madam Speaker. I
Drama
would yield 1
King,
minute to the
dramatic.
gentleman from
So,
Virginia,
I mean, would this
The
fall under
gentleman from
political
Virginia is
theater to some
recognized for 1
degree?
minute.
Thank you. I stand today in support of President Trump and against this sham impeachment proceeding with literally 1 week, 7 days remaining in his term. This is merely the culmination of a 4-year effort to overturn the will of the people and the results of the 2016 election. This is simply a political action intended to tarnish the legacy of a highly successful president who led us to an incredible economy, energy independence, reduction of taxes for millions, regulatory relief for businesses, renewed peace in the Middle East, and stronger border security. This action will only serve to further offend the 75 million people who voted for President Trump and further deepen the division within our nation as we try to move forward with a peaceful transition of power.
Exactly, horror
However, the
breed.
Democrat majority has
Joe,
determined
thank
he's
you so
already
much for that,
guilty,
man.
And there's no need of a trial, and they therefore move forward quickly with this phony impeachment charge. Today, I join my Republican colleagues in standing against this further effort to divide our nation. Thank you, and I yield back.
And yields back. The gentleman from Ohio wishes to reserve. The gentleman from New York is recognized.
Madam Speaker, I now yield 30 seconds to the distinguished gentleman from Texas, Mr. Cuellar.
The gentleman from Texas is recognized for 30 seconds.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I rise in support of the impeachment. It's very simple. What we saw on January 6th was a person, the President of the United States, incite a crowd to come and attack the crowd, the Capitol. We have to make sure that we stand up for democracy. If we don't do this, then what
John,
are
thank
we
you, my
gonna
man.
Stand for? We stand for democracy. We stand for American values, and I stand for the impeachment of Donald Trump. I yield back the balance of
The
my time.
gentleman yields back the balance of his time. The gentleman from New York reserves. The gentleman from Ohio is recognized.
Madam Speaker, we reserve.
The gentleman from Ohio wishes to reserve. The gentleman from New York.
Madam Speaker, I now
Smiley
yield 30
Brofist, thank
seconds
you so
to the
much.
distinguished gentlelady from Pennsylvania, Ms. Scanlon.
The gentlewoman from Pennsylvania is recognized for 30 seconds.
On January 6th, President Trump launched an attack against the United States Capitol. I too urge my colleagues to unite, but to unite in love of country and to hold this president accountable. What unites our country is respect for the rule of law.
Oh, they're scared, all right.
Without accountability for those who would shatter the rule of law by overturning a
They're
presidential
scared
election,
because
we
their
cannot
opposition
take
might have dirt on them, and they're worried about getting
prize of
exposed.
being a united people. This president remains a serious threat to our country and must be held accountable.
The gentlewoman's time has expired. The gentleman from New York reserves. The gentleman from Ohio is
reserve.
recognized, and he
Madam Speaker, we
chooses to reserve. The gentleman from New York is recognized.
Madam Speaker, I now yield 30 seconds to the distinguished gentleman from Georgia, Mr. Scott.
The gentleman from Georgia is recognized for 30 seconds.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Madam Speaker, let me make everybody aware
Oh boy.
that on those just sun-bleached bones of history of many great nations are written those pathetic words, too late. They moved too late to save their great nations. Let us not this day move too late to save our great nation.
Gentleman's time's expired. The gentleman from New York wishes to reserve. The gentleman from Ohio is recognized.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I would yield 1 minute to the gentleman from South Carolina, Mr. Norman.
The gentleman from South Carolina is recognized for 1 minute.
Mr. Speaker, I rise today for two reasons. One, to voice my strong opposition for the impeachment of this president with 7 days left. I also want to voice my support for the strong police department. Many of you want to defund.
Tell
Where
them.
was your cries to defund when you were leaving this office,
Tell them.
this very room on the 6th? Height of hypocrisy. I yield back.
Members are kindly reminded to remind yourself to address your remarks to the chair. The gentleman from Ohio wishes to reserve.
We do, Madam Speaker.
The gentleman from New York is recognized.
Madam Speaker, I yield 30 seconds to the distinguished gentleman from California, Mr. Sherman.
The gentleman from California is recognized for 30 seconds.
Ironic that administration begins by building an unnecessary wall on our southern border. It ends by making necessary a new wall
Joe,
around
thank you.
this Capitol. I introduced articles of impeachment in July of 2017 with one co-sponsor, Al Green, and
Kurt,
again in
I appreciate
January
that, brother.
of 2019. And on Monday night, I joined with so many of us in introducing these articles. I've introduced articles of impeachment in the 115th, 116th, and 117th Congress because Donald
Great
Trump
point, Chris.
has continuously
Has
posed a
expired.
danger to this
The
republic.
gentleman from New York wishes to reserve. The gentleman from Ohio is recognized.
Madam Speaker, I would yield 1 minute to the gentleman from Florida, Mr. Mast.
The gentleman from Florida is recognized for 1 minute.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I rise with a very simple question. On January 6th, thousands broke the law by taking siege of our Capitol here with us inside. Has any one of those individuals who brought violence on this Capitol been brought here to answer whether they did that because of our president?
Must be a glitch in the programming.
Horribly. That's hilarious.
It appears I will receive no answer. I will yield my time back to the gentleman from Ohio.
Gentleman yields back. The gentleman from Ohio wishes to reserve his time. The gentleman from New York is recognized.
I now yield 30 seconds to the distinguished gentleman from Arizona, Mr. Stanton.
The gentleman from Arizona is recognized for 30 seconds.
Donald Trump is the first president in the history of this republic to incite a violent insurrection against our own government, against our own people. It is a shocking betrayal of his oath of office and our American values. We don't know yet if the president will face criminal charges, but we do know he must be held to account. Each one of us in this House took an oath to protect and defend our Constitution against all enemies, foreign and domestic, even if that enemy is the president. We must move forward as a nation from these darkest days, but we can't move forward without accountability.
The gentleman's
We
time
must
has
impeach this
expired.
president. I yield back.
The gentleman from New York reserves, and the gentleman from Ohio is recognized.
Madam Chair, we reserve.
The gentleman from Ohio reserves. The gentleman from New York is recognized.
Madam Speaker, I now yield 30 seconds to the distinguished gentlelady from Michigan, Ms. Stevens.
The gentlewoman from Michigan is recognized for 30 seconds.
Insurrection, a violent mob. A week ago today, 5 people were killed, many injured, and everyone in this building forced to hide for their very life. The president was called for help, but he did not answer our call while our government was being taken over. He failed to lead and therefore proved himself incapable of doing so. Some may say impeachment is political.
I don't buy it.
Some may cry
She's
it
acting.
is divisive. But, Madam Speaker, our obligation
The
to our
gentlewoman's time has
Constitution
expired.
is
The
anything
time's
but.
expired. The gentleman from New York reserves. The gentleman from Ohio.
Madam Speaker, we reserve.
The gentleman from Ohio reserves. The gentleman from New York is recognized.
Madam Speaker, I yield 30 seconds to the gentleman from California, Mr. Takano.
The gentleman from California is recognized for 30 seconds.
Madam Speaker, I rise today in support of the impeachment of President Donald Trump. The gravity of the moment demands it, and the fate of our republic depends on it. He committed an impeachable offense by inciting a violent and deadly insurrection at the U.S. Capitol. For this, Congress must hold him accountable to preserve our democracy, our Constitution, and the rule of law. He should serve not 1 minute more and be barred forever from public office. He is toxic to our republic and toxic to our democracy. I yield back.
The gentleman yields back. The gentleman from New York wishes to reserve. The gentleman from Ohio is recognized.
So, thank you, Madam Speaker. So Democrats can say, quote, I just don't even know why there aren't uprisings all over the country, while there are uprisings happening around the country. But they impeached the President of the United States for saying peacefully and patriotically, make your voices heard. Democrats can say, quote, you know, there needs to be unrest in the streets, while there is unrest in the streets. But they're going to impeach the President for saying peacefully and patriotically, make your voices heard. Let's be consistent, all of us. All of us need to be consistent and condemn the violence all the time. And with that, I yield 1 minute to the gentlelady from New Mexico.
The gentlewoman from New Mexico is
Poor
recognized
Bree,
for 1 minute.
that's exactly what I
Thank
think.
you, Madam Speaker.
Every time I see
I rise
this
in
act,
opposition
I'm like,
to these articles of impeachment.
to see them
Political
put on
violence
like
has
this,
no place
it
in our
just,
constitutional
they don't
republic.
really, I just,
and
I don't
those who
believe
assaulted police officers and forced their way
it's-
into the Capitol are
just feels like a
responsible for their
scam.
criminal actions. Leaders
Everyone
in
on that
both
side of the
parties
aisle.
have a
And I don't mean to
responsibility
be so
condemn
divisive,
such
but
violence,
unfortunately that's
whether in
what
the
they're
halls
being.
of Congress or in the streets of America. I don't believe, Madam Speaker, that the American people have an appetite for this. They are expecting us to do the will of them, those who sent us from each state around the nation. Right now, Madam Speaker, we've seen this body impeach once before, trying to do it a second time. Two wrongs do not make a right. We have got to stand for the American people because we will not get a second chance to get this right the first time. Madam Speaker, I yield back.
The gentlewoman yields back. The gentleman from Ohio wishes to reserve.
We do. Thank you, Madam Speaker.
The gentleman from New York is recognized.
Madam Speaker, I now yield 30 seconds to a new member, the distinguished gentleman from New York, Mr. Torres.
Gentleman from New York is recognized for 30 seconds.
Madam Speaker, the dangerous mob
Guns,
that
games,
Donald
and
Trump
gadgets. What's
unleashed
up, dude?
on
Freedom,
the
no,
United
you're
States
not.
Capitol
Shadow
represents
banned.
a violent assault on the
There's just too
separation
much
of
to
powers
say over the mic while we're
and on
listening.
the peaceful transfer of power that we have long taken for granted. The impeachment of Donald Trump is not politics but law, not passion but reason, not vengeance but justice. And we as the people's representatives must rise to the challenge of defending democracy in the face of its gravest threat, and we will. I yield back.
The gentleman yields back. The gentleman from New York reserves. The gentleman from Ohio is recognized.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. We reserve.
Gentleman from Ohio reserves. The gentleman from New York is recognized.
Madam Speaker, I now yield 30 seconds to the distinguished gentlelady from Massachusetts, Ms. Tran.
The gentlewoman from Massachusetts is recognized for 30 seconds.
Madam Speaker, I stand before you today in disbelief. Disbelief that after the President incited a violent mob to commit an act of insurrection and remained silent as police officers were assaulted, the Capitol was ransacked, and members of this body fled for their lives, that there are still members of his party who refuse to hold him accountable. It's because of that inaction that there is only one path forward to put an end to this presidency. Donald Trump must be impeached, removed from office, and barred from ever holding the office of the presidency again. Thank you, Madam Speaker. I yield back.
The gentlewoman yields back. The gentleman from New York reserves his time. The gentleman from Ohio is recognized.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. We reserve.
The gentleman from Ohio reserves his time. The gentleman from New York is recognized.
Madam Speaker, I now yield 30 seconds to the distinguished gentlelady from New York, Ms. Velasquez.
The gentlewoman from New York is recognized for 30 seconds.
Madam Speaker, I rise in support of this resolution
because in America, we hold power to account. In America, we do not succumb to violent insurrections incited by a head of state. In America, we do not turn a blind eye to high crimes and misdemeanors. No, that is not who we are. So today, as a sworn defender of this nation's Constitution, I will vote in favor of impeaching Donald J. Trump. I yield back.
The gentleman from New York reserves. The gentleman from Ohio is recognized.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Could I again inquire the time remaining for each side?
The gentleman has 10 minutes remaining, and the gentleman for New York has 9 3/4 minutes remaining. The gentleman from Ohio is recognized.
I thank you, Madam Speaker. I would yield 1 minute to the gentleman from California, Mr. Malone.
The gentleman from California is recognized for 1 minute.
Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the second annual impeachment show extravaganza, brought to you by the censors and left-wing media, the fact-checked ministers of shutdown and big tech, and the Democrat Party. Today, the second annual impeachment of President Trump isn't really about actual words spoken out of rally. No. This is all about, Madam Speaker, the unbridled hatred of this president. You use any extreme language and any process to oppose the core of what he has really fought for. You hate him because he is pro-life, strongest ever. You hate him for fighting for the freedom of our religion to not be persecuted by unfair mandates and limitations on speech. You hate him for not subscribing and shackling us with the religion of climate change and one-sided Paris Accords. You hate him for Israel. You hate him for defending our borders. You hate him for letting families and small businesses keep what they earn, for trying to keep the agents of government off their back. You hate him for putting America first, which is what I thought we do when we swear the oath. No, this shabby show isn't about a threat to our republic. This is the impeachment and muting of at least half of the American people. This is shameful and abuse of a process.
Gentleman's time has expired. The gentleman from New
I yield the
York.
gentleman additional 20 seconds.
The gentleman from Ohio yields you
Madam
another
Speaker,
20 seconds. 30.
I pray people of all stripes wake up to this spectacle and exercise their rights to put a stop to it through free speech and through fair elections. I yield back.
The gentleman yields back his time. The gentleman from Ohio wishes to reserve. The gentleman from New York is recognized.
Madam Speaker, I now yield 30 seconds to the gentlelady from Florida, Ms. Wasserman-Schultz.
The gentleman from Florida is recognized for 30 seconds.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I rise to support the impeachment of President Donald J. Trump for seditious acts against America. To overturn the 2020 presidential
Mike,
election,
thank you so
Trump
much for that,
incited a
man.
violent assault on Congress, a treasonous betrayal of our nation. This criminal incitement left us with 5 dead, including a police officer, a desecrated Capitol, and a second constitutional crisis. His acts show contempt for the rule of law, the Constitution, and the foundation of any democracy, a peaceful transition of power. President Trump is a clear and present danger to American lives and democracy, and he leaves us no choice but to immediately remove him from office. Thank you. I yield back.
The gentlewoman yields back. The gentleman from New York reserves. The gentleman from Ohio
Thank you, Madam
is
Speaker.
recognized.
Yeah, thank you, Madam Speaker. I would yield 90 seconds to the gentlelady from Tennessee, Ms. Hirschberger.
The gentlewoman from Tennessee is yielded 90 seconds.
Mike Brofist,
Thank you,
man.
Madam Speaker. I urge my colleagues to vote against impeachment of our sitting President Donald J. Trump. You can tell the American people that this is a vote to impeach upon the grounds of inciting violence and insurrection, but the American people see a double standard. They see a standard implied to those on the left who commit violence, and they see a standard to those applied to the right who commit violence. The American people see this, and they understand it. I've been here all of 1 week, and what I see, instead of lawmakers who are truth seekers, I see lawmakers who are power seekers. And that's never good, never good. What a shame, what a shame. The American people are watching to see how their elected officials respond at this moment in history. Will you vote to mend, or will you vote to further divide this country? I'm urging you to use this opportunity to be the leaders the American people are seeking for such a time as this. God help us as a nation, and I pray that God will keep his hand upon the greatest nation that the world has ever seen. I yield back.
Amen. Yes.
The gentlewoman yields back. The gentleman from
You guys already know
Ohio
who
wishes
wins
to
in
reserve
the
his
end.
time.
We do,
The gentleman from New York is recognized.
Freedom, nah, man. You're
Madam
not blocked.
Speaker, how much time
I
do
can
we
see
have,
you.
please?
Gentleman from New York
Message
has
me on
9
Discord.
and
I'll
1/4 minute,
or I'll message you.
and Ohio has 8 minutes. The gentleman from Ohio, 8 minutes.
Thank you.
Gentleman from New York.
Thank you. Madam Speaker, I now yield 30 seconds to the distinguished gentleman from North Carolina, Mr. Butterfield.
The gentleman from North Carolina is recognized for 30 seconds.
Madam Speaker, President Trump's incitement to violently overturn the results of a free and fair election is an attack on our rule of law. Any president, any member of Congress who obstructs the Electoral College or attacks judges and the court system where there's no evidence to support their contentions undermines the public's trust and confidence in the judicial process. How do my Republican colleagues expect ordinary citizens to respect and trust the courts in civil and criminal matters all across this country? Think about that as you make this decision. Vote yes.
The gentleman's
thank
time
you so
has
much.
expired. The gentleman from New York wishes to reserve. The gentleman from Ohio is recognized.
Madam Speaker, we reserve.
The gentleman
Well,
from
then there's
Ohio
no
reserves.
real
The
way I
gentleman from New
can
York.
fill you in on what's going
Speaker, I
on with
yield
that
30 seconds to the distinguished gentlelady from
till
California,
the
Ms. Roy Bellalo.
representative stops
The
speaking.
gentlewoman from California is recognized for 30 seconds.
Madam Speaker, I take no joy in voting to impeach President Trump, but this president has blood on his hands in the wake of this attempted coup. The fact remains no president of the United States is above the law, and this president has sadly violated his oath to support and defend the Constitution of the United States against all enemies, foreign and domestic. As members of Congress who have taken that same pledge, it is our duty to take this action and impeach this unfit and dangerous president. I yield back.
Gentlewoman's time has expired. The gentleman from New York wishes to reserve. The gentleman from Ohio is recognized.
Madam Speaker, we reserve.
The gentleman from Ohio wishes to reserve. The gentleman from New York is recognized.
Madam Speaker, I now yield 30 seconds to the gentleman from California, Mr. Cano.
The gentleman from California is recognized for 30 seconds.
I'm voting to impeach because, as Lincoln said, no grievance is a fit object of redress by mob law. But we must recognize that our hard work begins to address the real grievances and despair in left-behind communities. To be worthy of this capital that we hold sacred, to fix our broken windows and broken communities, let's finally commit to investing trillions in creating good jobs in healthcare, in education, and infrastructure for communities and places that are hurting.
The gentleman yields back. The gentleman from New York reserves. The gentleman from Ohio is recognized.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. We reserve.
The gentleman from Ohio wishes to reserve. The gentleman from New York is recognized.
Madam Speaker, I now yield 30 seconds to the distinguished gentlelady from Alabama, Ms. Sewell.
The gentlewoman, Ms. Sewell, is recognized for 30 seconds.
Madam Speaker, I rise today to support impeachment. I do so with a heavy heart and a lasting and searing memory of being in this gallery, the People's House, right up there, fearing for my life. And why? Because the President of the United States incited others to be violent, a mob of insurgencies in this House. It's unacceptable. It led to the killing of 5 Americans. Blood is on this House. We must do something about it. I ask that we move from stopping the steal to healing, but healing requires accountability, and everyone must be accountable. Who is that?
Gentlewoman's time has expired. The gentleman from New York wishes to reserve. The gentleman from New York wishes to reserve. The gentleman from Ohio is recognized.
Madam Speaker, I would yield 1 minute to the gentleman from Alabama, Mr. Moore.
The gentleman from Alabama is recognized for 1 minute.
Madam Speaker, I'm fairly new here. Actually, this is my first floor speech. But I rise to oppose this impeachment. You know, I asked my staff this morning, I said, how many times in our nation's history have we impeached a president? Well, they said up until this president, only 2 times in our nation's history. So here we are, 7 days left in his first term, and we're going to impeach a president for what reasons? For what reasons? There have been no hearings. There have been no committees. We must defend the right and protect the process of impeachment. If we pursue this, from now on, from this day forward, impeachment will always be a political process. I ask my friends across the aisle, they always talk about healing. Healing. How do we come together as a nation? Since 2016, there has been hashtags going around in our nation that said, not our president. Resist, resist. Members across the aisle have said things in public to have supporters of this president attacked and demeaned. Thank you, Madam Speaker.
The gentleman from Ohio wishes to reserve. The gentleman from New York is recognized.
Madam Speaker, I now yield 30 seconds to the distinguished gentlelady from Illinois, Ms. Schakowsky.
The gentlewoman from Illinois is recognized for 30 seconds.
Last Friday, I sent a letter to my constituents telling the story about the violent attack on our Capitol building, which is really like the temple of our democracy. I have now taken the oath of office, the same oath of office that the President of the United States has taken, that all of us here have taken, and he has been the orchestrator of this attack. It is time to hold this president accountable. It is time, and history demands that we impeach
The gentlewoman's
Donald
time
Trump
has
for the
expired.
second
The
time.
gentleman from New York wishes to reserve. The gentleman from Ohio is recognized.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. We would reserve.
The gentleman from Ohio reserves. The gentleman from New York is recognized.
Madam Speaker, I yield 30 seconds to the gentleman from Connecticut, Mr. Himes.
The gentleman from Connecticut is recognized for 30 seconds.
The words have almost all been said. Search your soul, consider your oath. And I add 4 more words. Reflect on your legacy. My friends, which way is history flowing right now? Will Donald Trump join the pantheon of Washington, Lincoln, Roosevelt, and Reagan? Or will his 33% approval ratings and the condemnation of principled Republicans consign him to the heap of reviled demagogues with Joseph McCarthy and Andrew Johnson? Where he goes in history, you go in history, unless today you make a stand. I yield back.
Yields back. I would like to remind members to please direct their remarks to the chair. The gentleman from New York reserves. The gentleman from Ohio is recognized.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. We reserve.
The gentleman reserves. The gentleman from New York is recognized.
Madam Speaker, I now yield 30 seconds to the distinguished gentleman from Hawaii, Mr. Carolan.
The gentleman from Hawaii is recognized for 30 seconds.
Madam Speaker, as a member of our armed forces, now a member of Congress, I have taken and given the oath of office many times. I will support and defend the Constitution against all enemies, foreign and domestic. On January 6th, the President violated this oath, inciting violent and deadly insurrection. Our sacred oaths are hollow without accountability. We must hold this president accountable, remove him from office, ensure he can never hold public office again. I urge my colleagues to do the same. This oath has to matter. Mahalo, and I yield back.
New York recognized. The gentleman from Ohio reserves. The gentleman from New York is recognized.
The gentleman from Maryland, Mr. Sarbanes.
The gentleman from Maryland is recognized for 30 seconds.
Madam Speaker, this beautiful Capitol dome is a symbol of freedom and democracy, not just for Americans, but for people the world over. The action we take today, this impeachment, is a declaration to the world that when there is an attack on our democracy, whether it comes from without or whether, tragically, in this instance, it comes from within, we will respond to that threat and attack, and we will do what's necessary to strengthen our democracy. I yield back.
The gentleman yields back. The gentleman from New York wishes to reserve. The gentleman from Ohio is recognized.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I yield 2.5 minutes to the distinguished gentleman from New York, Mr. Zeldin.
The gentleman from New York is recognized for 2.5 minutes.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I am sickened and angered by what we all had to witness last Wednesday and call for the investigation and prosecution to the fullest extent of the law, every single person who participated in the violence and loss of life in this Capitol building last Wednesday. I, as a member, sit here listening to the entire debate, desperately need to better understand the two standards that are at play in this House. Why is it okay if a House Democrat calls for violence in the streets, but not if you're a Republican? Why can a House Democrat be rewarded with a gavel and a chairmanship if they're calling for physical confrontation of a Trump administration official, but they will be punished if they're a Republican? the double standards that we have seen time and time again, I need to better understand what the rules are of this House. Why is it that a committee chairman can lie to the American public about having more than circumstantial evidence that the president colluded with the Russians in order to win the 2016 election, but of course the Republicans can't and wouldn't lie to the American public about something like that? We need to better understand what these two standards are that are at play and to complete the record. Because the House Democrats are here to make President Trump the first president to be impeached twice. So I'll complete the record. First off, in the articles of impeachment, it's written that the president gave a speech and he told his supporters to come here and that he incited this riot. And one speaker after another here on the other side of the aisle have repeated that in the article of impeachment. But we all know that this was a pre-planned attack. We all know that there was pipe bombs being discovered while the president was speaking. We all know that the Capitol perimeter was being breached during the president's speech. We know that this was pre-planned and it started while the president was speaking. Why is that not in the articles of impeachment? Why is that not being incorporated into my colleagues' remarks? To complete the record, if you want to make the president the first president to be impeached twice, well, we'll add something else to that. Thank you to the president for his efforts to defeat MS-13 in my district or to withdraw from the, request 30 more seconds.
Fired. The gentleman yields an additional 30 seconds. Did I hear correct?
Yes.
The gentleman has another 30 seconds.
Thank you to the president for his efforts to move the embassy in Israel to Jerusalem and
John Connor
recognize Israeli sovereignty
596
over the Golan Heights and to
said,
take out Abu Bakr al-Baghdadi
there was
and
video of the
Qasem
people that
Soleimani,
first breached the
to
Capitol of
eliminate
them
the
being in
ISIS
Antifa
caliphate,
protests.
to enter into the historic Abraham Accords, to have an economy this time last year that was stronger than I ever remember in my entire lifetime. Yeah, we'll complete the record. And in all fairness, as the president leaves 1 week from today, let's be honest about the double standards that exist inside of this chamber. And let's also be honest that this president did a lot to make America greater than ever.
The gentleman's time has expired. The gentleman from Ohio wishes to reserve.
Thank you, Madam Speaker.
The gentleman from New York is recognized.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I now yield 1 minute to the distinguished I now yield 30 seconds to the distinguished gentleman from Illinois, Mr. Caston.
What happens
The gentleman's recognized for 30 seconds.
What happens if we get this wrong is written in Lincoln's second inaugural, when one party would make war rather than let the nation survive. On December 7th, on September 11th, we came together against an enemy from without, but on January 6th, we were attacked by an enemy from within, the president who would make war with malice for all and charity for none. We must come together in unity today against that domestic threat to our Constitution.
Unbelievable.
The alternative is too unbearable to contemplate. We must impeach, bipartisanly, unanimously, if you have the soul.
The gentleman from New York wishes to reserve. The gentleman from Ohio is recognized.
Madam Speaker, we reserve.
The gentleman from Ohio reserves. The gentleman from New York.
Madam Speaker, I now yield 30 seconds to the distinguished gentlelady from Texas, Ms. Fletcher.
The gentlewoman from Texas is recognized for 30 seconds.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I rise today in support of the article of impeachment and in opposition to the gaslighting that is masquerading as debate in this chamber today. I was in this chamber when the president assembled and unleashed a mob to attack the United States Capitol and the United States Congress.
They are
the
so
elected
twisted.
representatives
I
of
mean,
the
this is
people.
not true.
By doing so, he incited an insurrection against our representative
They
democracy.
use their little
itself.
word salads to
If that
twist
is
it.
not an impeachable offense, then what is? Thank you, Madam Speaker. I yield back.
The gentlewoman yields back. The gentleman from New York reserves. The gentleman from Ohio is recognized.
Madam Speaker, we reserve.
Gentleman from Ohio wishes to reserve. The gentleman from New York is recognized.
I now yield 30 seconds to the distinguished gentlelady from Michigan, Ms. Tlaib.
The gentlewoman from Michigan is recognized for 30 seconds.
Thank you, Madam Chair. In Michigan's 13th, we proudly speak truth to power, even in the face of a racist in chief. Those who incited an attack on the People's House do not get to talk about healing and unity. They have torn this country apart. They have stoked the fire and then handed the gasoline to Donald Trump. Dr. King once said, True peace is not merely the absence of tension. It is in the presence of justice. Today, we must embody those words, and we must understand that peace must be centered in truth and action. We cannot sit, Madam Chair, sit idly by after a violent attempted coup and allow lies and hate to continue. Today, we stand up for our constituents who continue to be harmed by the
York wishes to reserve. The gentlewoman's time has expired.
Donald Trump.
The gentlewoman's time has expired. The gentleman from New York wishes to reserve. And the gentleman from New York has 3 3/4 minutes remaining. From Ohio has 4. And the gentleman from Ohio is recognized.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I yield 1 minute to the gentleman from North Dakota, Mr. Armstrong.
The gentleman from North Dakota is recognized for 1 minute.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. What happened last Wednesday is an absolute tragedy. And not only are we part of dealing with it now, we were part of it then. But when emotions are frayed and tensions are this high, process matters more. It matters more now than it did before. And the reality is this: there are serious constitutional questions about these articles. And Donald Trump is going to be president until January 20th. And on January 20th, Joe Biden's going to become president. But I'll end with this. I'm going to vote against impeachment, and that's going to give me credibility at home with my base. You're going to vote for impeachment, and that's going to give you credibility at home with your base. It's easy to point at me and blame me. It's easy for me to point at you and blame you. But on January 21st, we're all going to be back here. So use that credibility. Go back and talk some hard truths to your people. I'm going to do it, and we need to do a better job. And with that, I yield back.
Wow, nice.
The gentleman yields back. The gentleman from New York reserves. The gentleman from Ohio reserves. The gentleman from New York.
Madam Speaker, I now yield 30 seconds to the gentlelady from North Carolina, Ms. Manning.
The gentlewoman from North Carolina is recognized for 30 seconds.
Madam Speaker, this president has repeatedly lied to the American people about his election loss. He incited his followers to attack our democracy, resulting in 5
what's up,
deaths.
dude?
His dangerous efforts to derail the peaceful transition of power were a violation of his oath of office. This president is unfit to lead our nation and unable to discharge his duties of office. I call upon my Republican colleagues to speak the truth to their supporters and join me in holding President Trump accountable by voting to impeach. I yield.
New York reserves. The gentleman from Ohio is recognized.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. We reserve.
The gentleman from Ohio reserves. The gentleman from New York is recognized.
Madam Speaker, I yield 30 seconds to the gentleman from Indiana, Mr. Mervan.
I didn't hear where it was from. The gentleman from Indiana is recognized for 30 seconds.
Madam Speaker, since the events on January 6th, I spoke with a group of ministers from Gary, Indiana, and they told me how they are praying for unity and justice in our nation. It reminded me of the moment when those of us who were on the House floor on January 6th were huddled together in a secure room after the attack. The House chaplain, Kiblin, led us all in prayer. Let us remember that moment. Let us rekindle that prayer for those 3 minutes when we were all united to preserve our democracy and justice. I support the article of impeachment so that we can move forward to do the work that our constituents sent us here to do. With that, I yield back.
Has expired. The gentleman from New York reserves. The gentleman from New York has 2 3/4 minutes remaining. The gentleman from Ohio has 3. The gentleman from Ohio is recognized.
Madam Speaker, we reserve.
The gentleman from Ohio reserved. The gentleman from New York is recognized.
Madam Speaker, I now yield 30 seconds to the gentleman
Exactly,
from
Billy.
Massachusetts, Mr. Moulton.
The gentleman from Massachusetts is recognized for 30 seconds.
Madam Speaker, there are more
Exactly,
troops
Graham.
right now
Welcome
in
to the
Washington,
Twilight
D.C.
Zone.
than in Afghanistan. And they are here to defend us against the Commander-in-Chief, the President of the United States, and his mob. I would ask my colleagues to look at the faces of those young Americans defending democracy, defending us, and find an ounce of their courage to do the right thing, as several Republicans have, and take a tough vote for the future of democracy, for the future of our
The
country.
gentleman's time has expired. The gentleman from New York wishes to reserve. The gentleman from Ohio is recognized.
Madam Speaker, we reserve.
The gentleman from Ohio wishes to reserve. The gentleman from New York is recognized.
Madam Speaker, I yield 30 seconds to the gentleman from Texas, Mr. Vesey.
The gentleman from Texas is recognized for 30 seconds.
Madam Speaker, let's be clear about one thing. If we were on the eve of a Republican president being sworn in, and his Democratic predecessor had said the same thing that this president said, and incited his followers, his mob, to descend up on the Capitol, we will be joining them, not making comparisons, because guess what? I don't care about no base. I care about this democracy and this country. And what happened the other day should never happen again. And we need to stand up and say and do the right thing.
The gentleman's time has expired. The gentleman from New York reserves. The gentleman from Ohio is recognized.
All
Madam
I've got
Speaker,
to say to
the
Jim
Republican whip is prepared to close for us
really,
whenever
dude, you need to feel sorry for
appropriate,
all
so
of us.
We'll reserve until that's time.
I feel bad for you. I feel sorry
The gentleman reserves.
R.I.P. White America.
Speaker, I now yield-
You race
I now
bait.
yield 30
Dude,
seconds to the
why?
gentlelady
It's all
from
about race
Texas,
for you,
Ms.
then you're
Jackson Lee.
lost.
The gentlewoman from Texas is recognized for 30 seconds.
I was on that floor just 1 week ago, and so today the insurrectionist in chief will be impeached for insurrection. It is because he failed to defend this nation against all enemies, domestic and foreign, and he stood down near the White House and told a mob of domestic terrorists to go and show your strength, be strong. You can't gain anything because of weakness. We must hold him accountable. We can heal this nation, but he must be impeached today. We must impeach Donald J. Trump as an
Gentlewoman's time has
insurrectionist
expired. The
to do
gentleman
that
from New
now.
York reserves. The gentleman from Ohio is recognized.
Yeah, thank you, Madam Speaker. We reserve.
The gentleman from Ohio continues to reserve. The gentleman from New York.
Is the other side prepared to close?
Yes.
Then
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Madam Speaker.
Yes.
I yield
the
3
gentleman
minutes.
from Ohio.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I yield 3 minutes to the Republican whip, the gentleman from Louisiana, Mr. Scalise.
The gentleman from Louisiana is recognized for 3 minutes.
Oh boy,
Thank
here
you,
we
Madam
go.
Speaker, and thank the gentleman from Ohio for yielding. Madam Speaker, our nation still mourns the unacceptable violence and anarchy that took place in this Capitol last week. As we speak, arrests are still being made, and the anarchists who stormed our Capitol are being brought to justice, as should be the case. Emotions are still high, but in this moment, we need to be focused on toning down the rhetoric and helping heal this nation as we move towards a peaceful transition of power to President-elect Joe Biden next week. My prayers, Madam Speaker, are still with Capitol Police Officer Sieknick and Liebengood, who we lost, as well as all of the Capitol Police officers who risked their lives to keep us safe. They are true heroes, and they deserve all of our applause today. Madam Speaker, I've seen the dark evil of political violence firsthand, and it needs to stop. But all of us need to be unequivocal in calling it out every single time we see it, not just when it comes from the other side of the aisle. I oppose this rushed impeachment brought forward without a single hearing. And by the way, the Senate will not even take this up until President Trump is out of office. So let's keep that in mind. It will only serve to further divide a nation that is calling out for healing. Madam Speaker, many speakers today have invoked one of our nation's greatest leaders, President Abraham Lincoln. Maybe we should follow some of Lincoln's wisdom that he's imparted upon us in moments like this. As Abraham Lincoln was giving his second inaugural address in March of 1865, Lincoln issued us a challenge. This is what he said: "With malice toward none, with charity for all, with firmness in the right, as God gives us to see the right, let us strive on to finish the work we are in, to bind up the nation's wounds, to care for him who shall have borne the battle and for his widow and his orphan, to do all which may achieve and cherish a just and lasting peace among ourselves and with all our nations." Madam Speaker, in times like these, let us not reach out to our darkest demons, but instead, like Lincoln, seek the higher ground. May God bless this great United States of America. I yield back.
The gentleman from New York is recognized.
Madam Speaker, we can have all this, but we have accountability too. I now yield our remaining time, 1 minute, to the distinguished Majority Leader of the House, Mr. Hoyer.
The majority of the leaders recognized for 1 minute.
I thank the chairman for yielding. This is a troubled time, a sad time. It is a time where all of us have stood almost to a person and lamented the violence and the assault on this Capitol and the assault on democracy itself. It was right to do that. But this impeachment ought to be put in the perspective of what the Republican chair of the Republican conference said it was. She said the President of the United States summoned the mob, assembled the mob, and lit the flame of that attack. There has never been, she said, a greater betrayal by a President of the United States of this office, of his office, and his oath to the Constitution. That is why we are here today. That is why we are here today, just a week before that president, at the request of the American people, will leave office. And the issue is, what do we do? The 433 of us, I believe, who are here, do on behalf of the American people to respond to what Representative Cheney described happened on the 6th of January. A mob assembled by, summoned by, and then spoken to light the flame of the attack. To stop the steal. As we sat here, exercising our constitutional duty, and to his great credit, the Vice President of the United States following the Constitution of the United States of America, notwithstanding the fact that he was opportuned by the President not to do so. That mob sent by the President to stop the steal did so for a few hours. Not the steal, but the constitutional duty that we had. And so we ask ourselves, what do we do? What is our responsibility? What should we say in light of only the Civil War has an analogy? That doesn't mean there haven't been demonstrations in Washington before and demonstrations throughout this country before. but it is the first and only physical presence other than the 9/11 attack on this nation, which came from abroad and had a plane aimed at our Capitol dome. This attack was not from abroad. It was, as Liz Cheney said, summoned, assembled, and inflamed by the President of the United States of America, who in Liz Cheney said words that there has never been a greater betrayal by a President of the United States of his office and his oath to the Constitution. I pride myself as a member of this Congress who for 40 years has worked in a bipartisan fashion with many of your leaders, and do to this day. But are we to remain silent in the face of Liz Cheney's saying this was the greatest betrayal of the duty of the President of the United States in history? Are we to stand silent? Will we stand silent? Will we not stand up and say, this is not acceptable? Madam Speaker, for 4 years, Donald Trump has made no effort to hide his ambitions or his lacking of Republican principles. Not our principles, but the principles that Abraham Lincoln was just quoted as having said. Your president, our president, has never displayed those in the 4 years he's been President of the United States. He has allowed little constraint on his worst inclinations. His desire for autocracy and his glorification of violence have not been tempered, but rationalized by those who sought to profit financially and politically from their proximity to power. Upon the foundations of virtue, reason, and patient wisdom laid down by George Washington as our first president, Donald Trump has constructed a glass palace of lies, fear-mongering, and sedition. Last Wednesday, on January 6th, the nation and the world watched it shatter to pieces. There can be no mistaking any longer the kind of man sitting in the Oval Office or his intentions and capabilities. The curtain has been pulled back. The office to which he was elected could not temper or reform him. Washington's legacy was passed down to us not as written decrees. Mr. Speaker, the House is not in order.
The gentleman's correct. The House will be in order.
Washington's legacy was passed down to us not as written decrees, but understood norms. How we ought to act, how we ought to conduct ourselves. Term after term, each occupant has observed those norms out of a recognition that our Constitution's articles are not the only preservative of our democracy. For more than 2 centuries, Madam Speaker, whenever those norms were tested and strained, good and virtuous citizens on both sides of the aisle found common purpose in reaffirming those norms. But memory fades, and from time to time it must be refreshed. Madam Speaker, as the framers emerged from the Constitutional Convention, Benjamin Franklin was asked whether they had made America a monarchy or a republic. Probably all of us know this response. A republic, he answered, if you can keep it. That's the question today. If we can keep it. And the way we keep it is to say no to actions and words that do not promote the keeping of that republic. For millennia, people have understood that a republic is only as stable and lasting as the citizens and leaders who commit themselves to its upkeep. This president has shown us he's not committed to that project. His tweets every day have shown he is not committed to that project. Indeed, he openly disdains it and appears to prefer the alternative. But what of the rest of us? Those who have the honor and the great privilege and the weighty responsibility to represent the views of 750,000 of our fellow citizens. We in this Congress have an opportunity, no, a duty, to demonstrate our commitment, both as leaders and as citizens, to keeping America a republic.
Thanks, mods.
A republic that resolves its differences not through being ordered to come to the Capitol to prevent them from stealing the election, which was an absurd assertion from the very first day it was made. We cannot erase the last 4 years, Madam Speaker. We cannot turn back the clock, but we can look to the ideals and principles inherited from great presidents like Washington, like Jefferson, and yes, certainly like Abraham Lincoln and Franklin Roosevelt, and from outstanding Americans like Frederick Douglass, Harriet Tubman, Susan Anthony, Cesar Chavez, Martin Luther King, Thurgood Marshall, our beloved John Lewis, and yes, RBG, Ruth Bader Ginsburg, who taught us a lot about equality and inclusion. It's up to us to restore the vibrancy, Madam Speaker, of our democracy by reaffirming our commitment to the norms they passed on to us and entrusted to our care. But to make that possible, Madam Speaker, we must rise to this moment and not only affirm the virtues we cherish, but reject the vices we abhor. That's what I'm asking my fellow representatives on both sides of the aisle to do today. We all stood and we abhorred the violence that occurred and the threat to the very democracy that we hold so dear and swore an oath to protect and uphold. Reject deceit. Reject fear-mongering. Reject sedition, tyranny, and insurrection. Reject the demand for fealty to one man over fidelity to one's country. When I addressed the House during the debate over the articles of impeachment in December 2019, I said the following: we need not ask who will be the first to show our courage by standing up to President Trump. The question we must ask: who will be the last to find him? Senator McConnell, Representative Cheney, a number of other representatives who have spoken on this floor with great courage, Madam Speaker. Because there is much fear of Donald Trump. There's much fear of Donald Trump's tweets. There's much fear of Donald Trump's retribution for opposition. In my view, Donald Trump demands absolute loyalty and gives none in return. I hope others will join Liz Cheney. I hope others will be honest with themselves and with their constituents. As Liz Cheney was saying, there has never been a greater portrayal by a president of the United States of his office and his oath to the Constitution. Don't dismiss that. She's the daughter of a vice president of the United States who was the whip when I came to Congress. As she has taken a stand, I hope others will as well, Madam Speaker. Soon, clerk will call the roll and ask for our votes. Make no mistake, this will be no ordinary roll call. This is about our country, our Constitution, and our democracy. These votes will be inscribed on the roll of history, a record of courage and of our commitment to country and Constitution, of our commitment to the rule of law and renewal of that which we inherited and hope to pass on, unbroken, unshattered. With just 7 days left in the president's term, this vote is not about timing. It is about principle and fidelity to our Constitution. It concerns the clear and present danger facing
You really
our
have to
country,
ask
not
yourself,
only in these
why
final days of the
impeach
Trump
him
administration,
with 7 days
but in
left?
the weeks, months, and years that will follow. It is about the necessity to demonstrate to this generation and to future generations the duty we share to protect our democracy every single day. Do not pretend, my friends, that it was simply those who came into the Capitol, encouraged by our president to stop the steal at any cost. And by the way, if the vice president doesn't do my bidding and follows the Constitution, sweep him away. We know that this president would never emulate George Washington and give up his power for the good of our republic, even after losing an election. Somebody talked about a peaceful transition. There has not been a peaceful transition. I don't know what you're talking about. You're not living in the same country I am. It was just days ago that the president, after committing this terrible act, thought he had to admit that Joe Biden might, yes, be president of the United States. We know that this president neither recognizes norms nor reflects the rule of law. We know that this president is not a patriot. So I ask this House, who among us, Madam Speaker, will be recorded on the roll of history for their courage, their commitment, the Constitution, and their country? We do this today not for politics. We don't need this for politics. Georgia showed that. There was no mistake in this election. We do this today to preserve and protect this great democracy. We do it for the America we love, our America the beautiful, whose founders' sacrifices we praise in song. Oh, beautiful for heroes proved in liberating strife, who more than self their country loved, and mercy more than life. Sadly, Madam Speaker, as our current president, the appropriate words would be,
Wow, Madam
less
President.
than self,
Sounds like he almost said Madam President.
his country loved,
Freudian slip.
and victory more than truth. Vote for this, for America, for our Constitution, for democracy, for history. I yield back the balance of my time.
All time for debate has expired. Pursuant to House Resolution 41, the previous question is ordered on the resolution. The question is on adoption of the resolution. Those in favor say aye. Those opposed say no. In the opinion of the chair, the ayes have it. The gentleman from Ohio is recognized. For what reason?
Thank you, Madam Speaker. We'd ask for a roll call vote.
Pursuant to Section 3S of House Resolution 8, the yeas and nays are ordered. Members will record their votes by an electronic device.
Less than 13 months since he was impeached the first time in December 2019, President Donald Trump is on the brink of being impeached again, this time for one article of incitement of insurrection for his actions before, during, and following last week's deadly attack
John Connor
on the
596
U.S. Capitol. The article saying, in part,
said,
President Trump
"Didn't
gravely
YouTube cut
endangered the
T-Man's
security
channel?"
of the United States and its institutions of government. He threatened the integrity of the democratic system. interfered with the peaceful transition of power.
They didn't
and
cut the
imperiled
T-Man's
coordinate
channel.
branch of
They
government-
put a strike on
government.
it,
He
which kept
thereby
him
betrayed
from
his
uploading for
trusted
7
president
days.
to the manifest
Convenient,
injury
right?
of the people of the United States. You can read all of that at cspan.org/impeachment. In this vote, expected to be a lengthy one with some 64 members requesting proxy votes, 57 actually for this vote. We expect 7 Republicans to likely vote yes in favor of impeachment, including just announced in the last few minutes, Peter Meyer of Michigan.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. As the member designated by Ms. Strickland of Washington pursuant to H-Res 8, I inform the House that Ms. Strickland will vote yes on H-Res 24.
Gentleman from California seek recognition.
Madam Speaker, as member designated by Congressmember Napolitano pursuant to House Resolution 8, I inform the House that Congressmember Napolitano will vote yes on H Resolution 24. And Madam Speaker, as member designated by Congressmember Costa pursuant to House Resolution 8, I inform the House that Congressmember Costa will also vote yes on H-Res 24.
Gentleman from Texas seek recognition.
Madam Speaker, as the member designated by Mr. Crenshaw, Texas, pursuant to House Resolution 8, I inform the House that Mr. Crenshaw will vote no on House Resolution 24.
Gentlewoman from Maine seek recognition.
Madam Speaker, as the member designated by Ms. Custer of New Hampshire, pursuant to H-Res 8, I will inform the House that Ms. Custer will vote yea on House Resolution 24.
The gentleman from Tennessee seek recognition.
Madam Speaker, as the member designated by Mr. Fleischman of Tennessee pursuant to H-Res 8, I inform the House that Mr. Fleischman will vote nay on H-Res 24. As the member designated by Mr. Desjardins of Tennessee pursuant to H-Res 8, I inform the House that Mr. Desjardins will vote nay on H-Res 24.
For what purpose does the gentleman from New Jersey seek recognition?
Madam Speaker, as the member designated by Ms. Bonnie Watson Coleman pursuant to H-Res 8, I inform the House that Ms. Watson Coleman will vote yes on H-Res 24. And as the member designated by Mr. Albio Series pursuant to H-Res 8, I inform the House that Mr. Series will vote yes on H-Res 24. And finally, as the member designated by Mr. Paul Tonko, pursuant to H-Res 8.
Looking that way,
I inform the House
Jules.
that Mr. Tonko
It's looking that
will vote
way.
yes on H-Res 24.
For what purpose does the gentleman from Kansas seek recognition?
Madam Speaker, as a member designated by Mr. Letourneau, Kansas, pursuant to House Resolution 8, I inform the
got
House
what,
that Mr.
Charm?
Letourneau will vote nay on House Resolution 24.
Purpose does the gentleman from Illinois seek recognition?
Madam Speaker, as the member designated by Ms. Presley of Massachusetts pursuant to H-Res 8, I inform the House that Ms. Presley will vote yes on H-Res 24.
Does the gentleman from Connecticut seek recognition?
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Madam Speaker, as the member designated by Mr. Adam Smith of Washington State, pursuant to House Resolution 8, I inform the House that Mr. Smith will vote yes on H-Res 24.
Yes, the planet Earth. That's correct. I do believe they are causing the downfall. Their indoctrination from the schools all the way up the chain. I don't call for any violence. I don't support any violence. I don't, you know, I'm agreeing that I think they are certainly a large cause.
For what purpose does the gentlewoman from Illinois seek recognition?
Madam Speaker, as the member designated by Mr. Carson pursuant to HRES 8, I inform the House that Mr. Carson will vote yes on HRES 24.
$400 or so, I thought, JC. I'm not exactly positive on that, though. as far as how many people make up the House. I could be totally wrong on that number.
What purpose does the gentleman from New York seek recognition?
As the member designated by Chairwoman Eddie Bernice Johnson pursuant to HRES 8, I inform the House that Chairwoman Johnson will vote yea on HRES 24. As the member designated by Congressman Brendan Boyle pursuant to HRES 8, I inform the House that Congressman Boyle will vote yea on HRES 24.
You know, it's all angles, really. The left getting into taking over Hollywood, or at least demanding that their ideals be, put upon the American people and into their TVs and their mainstream media, from the movies to the TV shows. There's a serious indoctrination effort. It's no coincidence that propaganda became legal some time ago. And I don't want to sound inflammatory saying it's all Obama's fault, and I'm not saying that. What I'm saying is I do believe that it was his administration that made propaganda and monopolies legal again in the United States. And it's just a serious indoctrination campaign, and they prey on the empathetic.
Seek recognition.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. As the member designated by Dr. Dunn of the state of Florida pursuant to HRES 8, I inform the House that Dr. Dunn will vote nay on HRES 24. As the member designated by Mr. Buchanan from the state of Florida pursuant to HRES 8, I inform the House that Mr. Buchanan will vote nay on HRES 24.
Pennsylvania seek recognition.
Madam Speaker, as the member designated by Mr. Lawson of Florida 5th Congressional District pursuant to House Resolution 8, I'm informed that Mr. Lawson will vote yes on H.R. 24.
This is the gentleman from California seek recognition.
Madam Speaker, as the member designated by Representative Michelle Steele, pursuant to House Resolution 8, I inform the House that Representative Michelle Steele will vote no on House Resolution 24.
This is the gentleman from Nebraska seek recognition.
Madam Speaker, as a member designated by Mr. Bill Rackus of Florida pursuant to HRES 8, I inform the House that Mr. Bill Rackus will vote nay on HRES 24.
Be a no from Nebraska. All right, real quick, Charmed, I hope you don't mind. I'm going to read, see if I can get this open. And where was this from again? The
For what purposes the gentleman from Arizona seek recognition?
As a member designated by Representative Cardenas pursuant to H.R. 8, I inform the House that Representative Cardenas will vote aye 24.
This is from the president's campaign team. Statement from the president. In light of the reports of more demonstrations, I urge there must be no violence, no law breaking, and no vandalism of any kind. That is not what I stand for, and it is not what America stands for. I call on all Americans to help ease tensions and calm tempers. Thank you.
Let's be here for a second. Just thought it would be something different. It is. Did you go? You didn't go to the Bureau yet. I went to the Bureau.
Sorry guys, the audio is not very good from this video. It's only coming in on mono, so we don't get to hear very much at all. I'll work on that, try and get a better view of what's going down on the streets of Washington, D.C. right outside the Capitol. Yeah, I totally agree. Everything is, the groundwork for another setup is totally laid to set up for another. So if they can get actual right-wingers to actually go out, there's no telling what actors might be there to get it going, get it started, and they'll frame Trump supporters and Trump for violent insurrection. And the hypocrisy is that they've actually been doing it for months, and it's just crazy what's going down right now, guys. I hope somebody out there is backing all this up offline, you know, like an order of events, you know. This isn't even unprecedented. This is insane, dude. This is bananas.